Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. So on today's video, I'm going to be talking about pendulums, what they are, what they're used for, how you can use them, as well as how to use pendulum boards. So this is going to be a really long video, so buckle up because we're going on an adventure. So pendulums are one of the most underrated forms of divination. Tarot and oracle cards seem to overshadow the wonderful pendulum, but in reality, pendulums are actually one of the most useful types of divination tool because they're so quick, easy, effective, and really portable. So what is a pendulum? Well, a pendulum is quite simply a weighted object at the end of a length of cord. It can really be any size or shape of object and any length or shortness of cord. Now, most commonly, you find pendulums in either metal, like this one, or you find them in crystal, like this one. But in reality, a pendulum can be any weighted object at a length of cord. Now, it just needs to be something that's weighted enough to amplify a swing, and it needs to be something that can move freely. So it needs to be something that can easily move in any direction, not just something that moves easily back and forth but struggles side to side. It needs to be something that can move in any direction. But beyond that, a pendulum really can be made of literally anything. It can be metal, it can be crystal, but it could also be a ring on the end of a piece of string. It could be a necklace pendant. It could simply be a small rock that's been tied with cord. It could be a hagstone with a ribbon around it. There are so many different things that you can use for pendulums. You can even go as far as using natural items, so something like an acorn is quite good as a pendulum, a pine cone is quite good as a pendulum. I think it was Lady Gravedancer on YouTube. I watched this video like a good couple years ago now, but I think she recommended using a dried orange slice and a piece of your own hair as a pendulum. I will link that video down in the description box if you're interested, because that is a fascinating video. She has an amazing channel. But that is a really nice way of making a really quick makeshift pendulum if you don't have one or don't necessarily want to buy one straight away. And that's the really nice thing with pendulums, unlike with tarot cards or runes, where it's a more lengthy process to actually make your own. With pendulums, it can be really simple. So if you don't really want to go out and buy a pendulum, if you're brand new to divination, or if you don't know if you like pendulum divination, then you can make your own really easily, and it can just be a temporary thing. It's something that you can do super quickly on the go if you need a really quick answer. So what kind of answers can pendulums give? Now, pendulums are one of those devices where it really depends on the way you use them. So pendulums by themselves typically only give yes/no answers. So they're not going to give you a full spectrum of what could happen and what will happen and what might happen, like a tarot deck or an oracle deck or a set of runes. Instead, pendulums offer yes/no answers to simple, specific questions. And that's what pendulums are really good for. Oftentimes, people don't solely use a pendulum as their only divination method. People often use them alongside tarot cards, alongside oracle decks, alongside runes or tea leaf reading or cartomancy. There are so many different divination methods that pendulums work alongside, and they offer something slightly different. So a lot of people, once they get a tarot deck, they think that they won't need any other form of divination. But actually, pendulums are very useful because they offer quick yes/no answers, and they're a hell of a lot more portable than a 78 card tarot deck. So, one of the biggest questions and most highly debated questions within the witchcraft and divination community is how pendulums actually work. And that is kind of difficult to answer, honestly, because there are so many different versions and there are so many different beliefs, and different people use pendulums in different ways. And that's really the key component in this, because pendulums can be used to work in lots of different ways for lots of different purposes, and so how they move generally changes. Now, pendulums at their core are designed to be a tool to tap into the subconscious mind. the part of our mind that we can't normally enter or work with during day-to-day mundane life. You tend to need to be in meditation, in trance work, working with divination tools to be able to tap into that underlying subconscious mind that everyone has. But pendulums can also be used to work with spirits. They can be used to work with the fae. So it really depends on how you use them as to how a pendulum will work. And that's the main thing that I see so many people arguing about with pendulums. You've got one person saying that it's spirits that move them, you've got another person saying that it's your subconscious movements that move it, and it really all depends on how you personally use your pendulum. So if you are working with ancestors or spirits or the fae, then it is more likely that it would be spirits, fae, ancestor energies that are moving the pendulum. But if you're trying to tap into your subconscious, then it is far more likely that it's your subconscious that's doing the moving. So this argument has gone on for as long as I have been within this community, so about 13 years, and I have seen this argument never ending on every single forum and every single community I've ever been on. So I will leave it up to you as to what you believe, but I'm going to be going into the two different beliefs that people have depending on how you use pendulums. So when we are doing divination for ourselves, so without working with spirits or entities or demons or fae or angels or ancestors or deities or whatever else you want to work with, when we are just working pendulums for ourselves, I am personally under the belief that it is our subconscious mind that assists in the movement of a pendulum. So everyone on earth has micro movements. So these are things that we aren't controlling. They are things that your body does subconsciously. So people who have kind of shaky hands, they aren't purposefully shaking their hand. It's something that their body and their muscles are just doing. And that's kind of what pendulums tap into. They tap into our micro movements. Now, it is believed by a lot of people within the magical and divination community that when we go into a state of divination, so we are trying to tap into that psychic, that subconscious mind and that energy, that this can affect the micro movements that our body does. So as we are trying to think of the answers to our questions, as we are trying to tap into that psychic energy, our body does micro movements, almost as answers to the questions, because most of the time when you're using a pendulum, you're answering questions that you technically kind of already know the answer to. Whether that's through our guides, through our spirit animals, through whatever you want to believe, we sort of already know the answer to the questions. Pendulums often assist us in finding the answers that we already know in ourselves, but just haven't brought it to the forefront of our mind. So when you tap into this psychic energy, this subconscious mind, the micro movements that this causes can actually answer questions that we really already knew the answer to. We just needed to be told the answer. And that's the great thing about pendulums, is that they work with us. They allow us to open up that psychic energy, that ability to gain kind of psychic abilities, to work better with tarot, to work better with runes, to be more intuitive. Pendulums can really help open a door to that because they tap into that subconscious mind that we would never normally tap into. Now, other people work with pendulums alongside other things. So they work alongside, say, spirit boards, or they work alongside spirits or ancestors or angels or deities. And it's then used as a channeling tool. So what you would then do is, if you're working with spirits, for instance, you would say that if a spirit wants to come forwards and answer questions or communicate, then it can communicate, if it chooses, through the pendulum. In which case, a pendulum is then used as a spirit communication device, whether that's connecting to the fae, to demons, to angels, to guardians, to guides, to deities, to ancestors, whatever it may be. The pendulum then acts as a means of communication, where it's their micro movements, their micro effects on the physical world that creates a shift in the movement of the pendulum. Now, different people believe different things, and I'm going to leave it completely open to you as to what you believe. I am in no way an authority figure in any of this. If you want to believe a different thing than other people, that is completely fine. This is just what I know, what I have been taught, what I have experienced over the years. And those are the two ways that I have found pendulums to move by successfully and consistently. And it really does depend on how you choose to use the pendulum. So before I get into how to use a pendulum, how do you go about getting or making a pendulum if you want to? Now I'm adding this little bit in first because I know that a lot of people are going to want to own a pendulum or at least know how to make a pendulum before they dive into learning about how to use one. Because some people are a little like me and they like just jumping headfirst into things and just doing it straight away. So I'm going to add this little bit in here so that you guys know how to buy or create your own pendulum so you can use it straight away if you want to. Now, I personally like having pre-made pendulums. My favourite ones are made of metal and crystal, and that's mainly because I find that each pendulum has its own unique little personality. And I like the idea of having my pendulums forever. I like the idea of my pendulums being able to last in my collection for years and years and decades and, centuries, possibly, if I'm lucky. Doubtful. So I like them being of long-lasting materials like metal or crystal, but you can also find them in glass, you can find them in seed form, you can find them made out of wood, you can find them made out of berries and seeds and all of these wonderful things. But I like using long-lasting pendulums. So if you're like me, and you want to get either a wood or a stone or a crystal pendulum that's in like a pendulum shape, the very traditional, typical shape, which is this kind of like cone shape, then I would suggest avoiding online and going straight to either a metaphysical witchcraft store or going to a market store. And that is because it is more important to find a pendulum that you connect with than finding a pendulum that looks pretty. I will be going in depth into my personal pendulums and the mistakes that I made in a separate video that should be up really, really soon. But I have personally found that buying pendulums online never ever works quite as well as you hope it will. I find that you have to know you're going to have a connection to that pendulum first before you get it and bring it home and try to work with it, because the connection is really the most important thing, and that's why you really can make pendulums out of anything. Because if you are connected to the items, if you've made it yourself, or if you are very bonded to the pendulum that you've bought, you are going to get far better responses from the pendulum than if you were to borrow someone else's pendulum or if you were to use something that you weren't connected to. It's really important that you have that connection to get the steady, consistent, successful results when working with one. So if you're like me and you want to get a pre-made pendulum, I would either go to a physical store or go to a market store. So somewhere like a holistic fair. I attend them all of the time. They are wonderful for finding pendulums. So either go to a physical store or go to kind of moving markets that kind of shift around the country. They are really good places to get pendulums. So once you're in the store and they have pendulums, what do you look for? Well, I personally wouldn't just jump headfirst into the pretty pendulum that you see first, because honestly, the way a pendulum looks really doesn't matter. You can have the prettiest pendulum in the world, but if you're not connected to it, it is not going to do you any justice whatsoever. So what I would do is, I would go up to the standard pendulums. Usually they have something kind of similar to this, which is like a spinning device thing that has all the pendulums hanging on it. No idea what it's called, but you know what this means. You know what I mean, it's this thing. And I would go round and I would actually sense the energy of each pendulum as you go round. So I'm doing this down here, but you can't even see what I'm doing. But like I would like hold the pendulum and kind of sense the energy, and then move on to the next one, hold the pendulum, sense the energy, hold the pendulum, and go round. And if you want to, you can kind of hold your hand away from it to see whether it draws you in. And I would suggest, if you don't already know how to sense energy, I would suggest doing a bit of research on that first, because that is such a useful thing to know how to do. But I would kind of go around and see which pendulums draw you to them. See which pendulums go, me, pick me, because that's the pendulum you are really going to want to work with. I can't believe I just did that. I'm so embarrassing. Anyway, I would go around and I would pick out the ones that you feel that really strong connection to. And if you've kind of got a short list of the ones that you have a real strong connection to, I would then take each pendulum in turn, loop it over your finger like this, hold the top so it's like loosely held, so it's not going to slip between your fingers, but it's there. And you're just going to want to ask it if it'll swing for you. Just show me a swing. It doesn't have to be out loud. You don't have to stand in like a witchcraft shop and go, swing, swing. You really don't need to. Just like say it in your head, just be like, can you swing for me, or can you show me a swing? And just see whether it swings for you. And if you can get a swing, judge kind of how easy it is. If it takes a while, maybe that's not the pendulum for you. If it happens really, really quickly, that is more likely to be a pendulum that really wants to work with you. And if you've gone through your short list of pendulums and there's maybe only one that is calling out to you, I would put it back, I'd walk around for a little bit, come back 10-15 minutes later and try again. And if you get the same positive response, I would then ask it another question of, would you like to consistently work with me? Or swing if you would like to consistently work with me. And then if you get a swing and you like the pendulum, I would consider getting that as your pendulum, because it definitely has that instant bond with you. Now, if you are lucky enough to have more than one pendulum that swings for you consistently and well, then I would go around and ask, would swing if you would like to consistently work with me, or swing if you would like to work with me more. And then you can whittle it down even further. And then once you've got to that point, it's about deciding whether you have a personal preference in the way they look and the way it feels and in the weight of the pendulum. And if you do, that is the pendulum that you go with, if you feel it's right. Now, some people go into a store and they may find no pendulums that they like. And that is completely fine. Just go to a different store, go to a different trader, go to a different event, or come back another day and see if there's new pendulums. And if you still can't find a pendulum that connects to you, and you maybe just like the look of a pendulum, then I would go with the one that you like the look of, but only if all the other pendulums you just don't have a connection to. If there's just something not quite there, you will know, believe me, you'll know if there's just something not quite there, and you'll also know if a pendulum connects with you. You will know instantly. I've had some pendulums where I don't even have to touch it and I'm like, yes, I am taking you home, because that connection is instant. I know it's kind of cheesy when people say, oh, you just know, but trust me, you just know. Sometimes you really do just know. And if you aren't able to go to a metaphysical store, if you aren't able to go to a market, and you want a pendulum that looks like this, it's pre-made, it's metal, or that is crystal, get online tentatively, very, very tentatively. I would then go for a material that you work with really well. So I know a lot of people work with copper really, really well, because it's a great energy conductor. I know that some people will immediately go for a crystal that they work with every single day and they always have good results from. And that is a good way of choosing a pendulum online, although I personally wouldn't ever recommend getting a pendulum online. I'd say that if you can go into a metaphysical store, go to a metaphysical store. Trust me, it is way more likely that you are going to connect with a pendulum. Way more likely. But if you have to get online very tentatively, or you can even buy, pendulum, or you can even buy kind of pendulum bases like these, so you can kind of get the crystal base, the pendulum-y bit, and you can then actually connect it to a cord yourself, and then at least you are putting your energy into making it, and then you are more likely to have a connection to it. So that's something else you can do. But if, even after trudging your way through 50 metaphysical shops and having a look online, and you still don't find something that you connect with, or maybe you just don't want something that's bog standard like this, maybe, I'm sorry pendulum, I just called you bog standard. If you don't want a normal traditional pendulum in this form, then I would suggest looking into making it yourself. You can use seeds, you can use berries, something like a dried rose hip is wonderful for making a pendulum out of. You can use pine cones, you can use acorns, you can use hagstones, you can use like glass vials with herbs inside them and crystals inside them. There are so many different things that you can use, but I will say that kind of more handmade pendulums made out of natural items that degrade, so things like berries or seeds or nuts, they are never going to last as long as a metal pendulum. They are just not. So take that into account when you are considering making your own. But if you do just want a temporary pendulum, you just see this video and you just want to give it a go after you've seen it, then you can use something like a cinnamon stick that is tied with a piece of your own hair. You can use like a dried orange slice tied with a piece of string. You can use a ring at a length of chain, like a necklace chain. You can use a pendant on the end of a necklace chain as just a tester, but they are definitely shorter term pendulums. And I personally have not seen the same results from a short-term pendulum as I have from a more long-term pendulum. So those are kind of the different ways that you can go about getting your own pendulum, whether that be making your own pendulum or whether that be buying it. I would say whatever you choose to do, make sure that you have a connection to the items you are using. Make sure that you are putting your energy into it. Make sure that you are really trying to connect to it. Because like I've already said, it is that connection that is really, really key. I've used a lot of pendulums, and only a few have I had amazing results from, because it really depends on the individual's connection to the individual pendulum. So I can't sit here and tell you, oh, crystal pendulums are better than every other type of pendulum, because in reality, not everyone is going to feel like that. I don't even feel like that. I think it's so dependent on the individual that you just need to try different pendulums. Just try them out and see how you feel. You know, try making your own pendulum to start off with. If it doesn't quite work out for you, try getting a store-bought pendulum, because these kind of pendulums, even say like the bigger, chunkier ones like this one, they aren't particularly expensive. You're looking at anything between kind of $4, $5 to about £15 for a really expensive one. So you're not looking very much money. So if you want to try both and just see whether you prefer store-bought or handmade. It's really the only advice I can give you on which one to choose. It's completely up to you. So now that I've gone into how you can go about buying a pendulum and the kind of pendulums that you can get, let's talk about how we can use a pendulum, how you actually get answers out of one. Now, I've already said that pendulums can be used in a few different ways, but the general basic method is the same regardless. You're just going to be asking the questions slightly differently. So as with all pendulums, if you're going to hold them in your hand, now I know some people have like a pendulum holder, but I personally hold the pendulum. That's just how I have always done it. I would take the cord and I would find kind of a comfortable length. So for me, that's kind of comfortable. You're going to want to kind of pinch it between your thumb and first finger and then loop it over your first finger. So you're kind of holding it like this. I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of it's a comfortable way of holding a pendulum. It's not just going to fall straight through your fingers, but it's sturdy enough that you can kind of easily get the vibrations going through your hand, if that makes any sense. Probably not. Now, I will say that not all pendulums are made equal, so some pendulums will have a really short diddy chain like this, and some pendulums will have a massive whop-off great big chain like this. So I would say use the suitable amount of chain. Don't leave yourself with so much chain that the pendulum is dragging on the table, but also you're not going to want to loop it so short that you can't get a decent swing. So I would just go with kind of your gut instinct on how far up to hold the pendulum. I tend to like leaving about 1.5 inches at the end, just enough to kind of hold in my hand while the rest of the pendulum is swinging. So you're going to want to have an elbow on a secure surface, and you're going to want to be on a secure surface. Now, I know that some people like having their arms like in the air, but I find that my arm spasms quite a lot when I do that, and I end up with like accidental kind of like whop off great big swings, and that's not really what you want. You want the pendulum to be able to amplify micro movements, or you want the pendulum to work with spirits. You don't want to be kind of forcing a swing because you've twitched or you've moved or something massive. So I would keep your elbow on a nice, secure, solid surface. Now, before you start working with a pendulum, every time you start working with a pendulum, you're going to want to ask it which swing direction is for which answer. Now, swings generally go in either one of two ways. They are either back and forth, side to side, or they are clockwise or anti-clockwise. Those tend to be the kind of two types of swings. They either clockwise, anti-clockwise, or back and forth, left and right. But a pendulum can have a yes swing that is a spiral, and it can have a no swing that's a straight line. So it's important to note that pendulums all have different swings. No two pendulum is going to have exactly the same swing, and pendulums can change swings between uses. So every time you start divination session with a pendulum, make sure that you check which direction is yes and which is no before you start. Otherwise, you might end up with really weird answers. Really weird answers. So some people do this by asking a question that's a lie and a question that's a truth. I personally do something way simpler. Can you show me a swing for yes? And then just let it do its thing. Now, you don't have to say this out loud. Once again, you can just say this in your head. I just say it out loud because you don't know what I'm going to say if I say it in my head. Unless any of you are mind readers, which I never know. You never know sometimes. But anyway, you're going to want to ask the pendulum to show you a yes swing, or can you show me your swing for yes? So I tend to repeat it like multiple times in my head. So I'm like, can you show me a swing for yes? Can you show me a swing for yes? Can you show me a swing for yes? And then it kind of amplifies the swing. And then you stop the pendulum and you go, can you show me the swing for no? So once you've got the kind of yes, no answers, you can then go into asking your questions, and you would then be working with yes, no answers, or answers that are either or. But I find that yes, no answers tend to work a lot better. You're going to want to ask questions that have kind of definitive yes, no answers. So you are not going to want to be asking questions that have 13 different answers and 25 potential different options. Like, it's not going to work. So you're not going to be able to ask questions like, what color should I paint my bedroom? Because it's not going to be able to give you an answer. You are going to want to ask questions like, will I be able to cope traveling abroad? And then you have a yes, no answer. Either it follows the yes swing, or it follows the no swing, and then you know. Now, I have found pendulums have funny ways of saying, I don't know, or maybe, maybe not, I don't know, who knows, give it time. And it tends to vary per pendulum, but the way mine likes to do it is it likes to just kind of do like a little jiggle. It's like, I don't know, stop asking me questions. That's kind of what my pendulum does. It's like, I don't know the answer, please move on to something else. But some people's pendulums will randomly start swinging in a completely opposite direction. So if you know that clockwise is yes and anti-clockwise is no, and you ask a question that it either doesn't want to answer or doesn't know the answer to, it'll just start like swinging back and forth. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, this is not one of the options. And that's generally the reason why. If your pendulum suddenly stops, like it's been swinging freely and you change questions and it just stops dead, that's an I don't know the answer, ask me later, whatnot. If it just jiggles, same again, it doesn't know. Or you've got to give it more time to know the answer. Or if it starts swinging in a random direction that you haven't planned, that is also likely an I don't know. To double check whether it is an I don't know and not just a muscle spasm, ask the same question again. If you get the same or you get the same random swing, then you know that it is a question that it cannot answer. So although I didn't mention this earlier, divination tools are not the be all and end all of everything. They don't know the answer to every single question. And sometimes it is not the right time to answer the question. Sometimes they simply don't know the answer to the question. So that is how you use pendulums to kind of work with psychic energy, to work with the subconscious mind. But how do you work with pendulums when you want to connect with spirits, ancestors, deities, fairies, demons, angels, whatever plethora of other potential spiritual beings there could be that you want to work with? There is a slightly different way of going about it, where instead of tapping into your own psychic energy, subconscious, you are allowing spirits to work with the tool. So it's similar to kind of automatic writing, where you are asking the spirit to work through your hand. It is also similar to something like a Ouija board where you're asking the spirit to work through the planchette. It's a little similar to that in that you are working with spirits to communicate through the swing of the pendulum. So what you would do is you would come into a safe space. I would generally recommend that you have protections up. If you are going to be working with spirits, I would just suggest you have protections up anyway, but especially if you're going to be working with spirits, please make sure you have protections up. Even if you're just working with fae or with ancestors or with anything else, I would just suggest having protections up. It's just the best idea. And then you would call the spirits and energies that are kind or whatever else you want to add into that, into the space. And if someone wants to communicate with you through the pendulum, you give them permission to do that, and then you would work with it in a similar way in that you ask a question and the direction it swings is the direction of the answer, and if you ask the same question multiple times, it helps to give clarification of whether it's just your muscle spasming or whether it is actually an answer to a question. So that's another way of using pendulums. Now, another way you can use pendulums, which is a way that I love using pendulums, and I'm hoping to do like a live video of this one day, that would be cool, is that when I'm loading spell candles and when I'm doing spell work for other people, is that I will actually use my pendulum and I will ask whether I've got enough of this ingredient to work with the person or if I've got enough of that to work with the person. And what I do in that instance is that I ask the spirits and entities around to assist me in connecting with the individual person's spirit guides, ancestors, kind of entities that are around them, to gauge whether what I am using in the spell for them is enough for their requirements. So for me, I would just say, is this enough sage? And it'll just swing yes or no, and then I can add a bit more if I need to, or I can take a bit out if it's too much. But when I'm working for someone else, I will actually ask kind of the spirits that are around me to work with the spirits that are around them to give me an answer as to whether or not I have enough ingredients. That sounds very, very confusing, but I promise it's a lot simpler in person. But I am hoping to do a full live video on loading candles, like whilst I'm loading candles, so you can see kind of my process and how I go about doing it. So you can see this firsthand, what I actually do with a pendulum in this instance. But generally it's kind of the 7-day glass candles where I will actually have the pendulum above the candle and I will ask, like, I call forth the energies and spirits around to connect with the guides, guardians, spirits, animals, and spirits connected with the person I'm doing this working on. And then I usually give kind of their full name of the person that I'm working on, and then I will wait for a response. And it doesn't tend to be instant, it tends to take a little while. And then you'll get a response as to whether what you're using is correct or if it really isn't correct, and then you can tweak it and work with it. And that's personally how I like doing workings for other people. It's not just me adding in how much I would use for myself. I actually work with other things that go behind the working, so I know that what I am doing for other people is suitable for them. So that's another great way of using pendulums, is that you can use them alongside other things like spell work, like loading candles, to adjust your working for the best response. Now, another great way you can do it is kind of making decisions on spiritual tools. So on one of my last videos on my in-bulk altar and how I set it up, and I had the time lapse, if you haven't seen that, I'll link that down in the description box. I had quite a few people asking, I can't remember whether it was in the comments on the video or whether it was in Pagan and Witches Amino where I actually posted the video. I had quite a few people asking me how I chose the crystals. And generally I choose crystals intuitively, but what you can do is, if you don't know which crystals to pick, you can work with the pendulum and get it to give you answers as to which is energetically the best crystal to work with in a specific scenario. So if you are new to kind of intuitively choosing items, like I'm very used to it now, I'm like holding 2 crystals in my hand and I'm like, this one, and I'll use this one, because that's just kind of how I'm used to doing it. If you aren't used to intuitively doing it, if you aren't used to intuitively sensing the energy, a pendulum can be really useful as kind of offering you guidance and assistance. So it's almost like, how can I describe this? It's almost like having a little familiar with you that isn't actually a familiar. It's like a little helper during spell work and ritual, but it isn't actually a spirit. It's just a little tool. And that's why I love my pendulums being long lasting, because to me, they do all have their own little personalities and they do all work with me in different ways for different things. So those are kind of the different ways you can use pendulums, and I find them super duper versatile for just taking out and about with me. I find them so useful. If I had the choice to take any of my divination tools out with me, say if I was going away for a month and I didn't know what divination tools to take with me, hands down, I would take my pendulum. At least one, maybe even two, because I find them the most effective divination tool for what they do, because they can do so much more than just yes/no answers. They can be much deeper guidance into spell work and ritual. They can almost be assistants in your practice, and that's what makes them so wonderful, is that they're portable, they're easy, they're affordable, you can make them yourself, but they're also exceptionally useful. So that is how you use a pendulum alone, as a freestanding item just by itself. But some people prefer to work with boards. Now, you can do spirit work with pendulums with a Ouija board or a spirit board. If you don't want to use a planchette, you can use a pendulum instead. And I will go a little bit into how to do that whilst I'm talking about actual pendulum boards, because there are pendulum boards that you can buy and they come in a few different varieties. So I'm going to show you the 3 that I personally have, so you can get a gauge for the kind that are available in the market. So you can get little pendulum boards. This is one that I actually hand painted myself. Little galaxy, it's got all the zodiac signs, and then super simple, yes, yes, no, no. Super simple, super easy. This is the most simplistic form of pendulum board. It just has yes, no. Very, very basic, not much going on there. You can then get pendulum boards like this. This is the most complex form of pendulum board that I have ever seen, where it has the zodiacs around the very edge, it has the numbers, it has the days of the week, it has yes, no, try again, and perhaps. So this is a really, really detailed pendulum board. That's very pretty too, and it's very, very useful and very in-depth. Now, I often find in my personal practice, I never really need anything as in-depth as this, but some people like having all of these different options. So these kind of boards are available. And then the biggest board that I have is kind of a nice in-between. This is a big wooden pendulum board. It looks a little like this. This is actually kind of an affirmation board as well, so it's maybe you are magic in the middle with the tree of life, and then on this side it has yes, maybe, no, numbers. This is one that I hand pyrographied myself and is possibly my favourite board ever. So this is the other kind of board that's available, where you have the 3 answers and then the numbers. It's kind of a nice in-between. So those are the kind of boards that you can get quite commonly. It's really up to you what kind of board you want to use. You can just print off a pendulum board. I'm actually tempted to make a digital pendulum board that people can print off. And if I do make one of those, I will put a link to the Tumblr where I post all of these things in the description box, so you guys can download it and print it off for yourself if you would like to do that as just a good tester. You can also just draw one on paper if you want. It's completely up to you as to the kind of pendulum board you want to try and play around with. I would suggest though, if you are new to using pendulum boards, that you don't go out and buy a whop-off great wooden pendulum board like this, that you actually just create one or print one off online and just practice with it and just see how you personally enjoy working the pendulum with a board, or if you even enjoy it at all, because not everyone likes working with boards. Like, I personally prefer just doing like freehand penduluming, and that is completely fine. But how would you go about using a pendulum with a board? So I'm actually gonna have to put the big board away because it's way too heavy to hold up to show you. So let's go with this kind of rather complex one, because it's quite lightweight. So a pendulum board is designed to be an extension of the pendulum. It is not in itself designed to be a unique tool. It's actually designed to be used with a pendulum, like directly with a pendulum. And that is what makes them so, so wonderful, is that they are actually designed solely to connect with a pendulum. So what you would do is you would take your pendulum and you would lay your pendulum down onto the board. And you're going to want to ask the pendulum to connect with the board. Oh, pendulum's rolling. You're going to want to ask the pendulum to work with the board, to agree to connect to the board, and to work with the board's directions. And that is mainly what you want to do to start off with. You're just going to want to get the pendulum to connect to the board. That is the most important thing. You're then going to want to take your pendulum, and you are going to want to lift your pendulum just slightly off the board. Very, very close to the board still. And now you're going to want to ask your pendulum again, will you work and connect with this pendulum board so that the answers you give are the answers displayed on the board? So you are then going to want to ask the pendulum to show you a yes or a no. So I will say that on this board, the actual directions are opposite of what my pendulum, this one that I'm holding, naturally swings in. And that's really important because the idea of a pendulum board is that it removes the requirement to ask the pendulum to show you a yes or a no and for it to potentially be different every time. A pendulum board is great because it allows the pendulum to follow the yes-no directions on the board. So it should, in theory, always be in the right direction in association with the board. So you would then go, show me a yes. And then when you want to stop it, you can just touch it to the board again and get it to stop. And then lift it up and go, can you show me a no? Now, my pendulum now swings opposite to the way it would normally swing. Because on this board, this way is a no and this way is a yes, whereas my pendulum naturally swings no, yes. So once you have the pendulum connected to the board, you can then ask questions like you would normally, and it works with the symbols on the board. So this particular one has a perhaps, a try again, a yes and a no. So you then work with the symbols on the board. Now, if your pendulum does not want to swing in accordance to the board, I would suggest then putting the pendulum back on the board and starting again. Will you connect with this board to use the directions displayed on the board? Lift it up, ask if it'll do it again, show it a yes, show it a no. If it still won't do it, start again. You might have a very, very stubborn pain in the butt pendulum. Believe me, they exist. In which case you may want to give the pendulum a bit of a cleanse and then come back and start doing this all over again. But eventually, I have not yet found a pendulum that won't connect to a pendulum board. Given enough time, it does just take a little bit of time sometimes. So that's how you would use kind of a basic directional pendulum board. Now, using these kind of numbers, using the days of the week, using the zodiac symbols, this is similar to how you would work a pendulum with a spirit board, and that is that it's less about the direction of the swing and more about the quantity of swing or the swing at all. So what you would want to do is you are going to want to ask a question after you've connected the pendulum to the board. So a lot of people would, for instance, ask kind of what day of the week something is going to happen on, or what zodiac sign their kind of life partner is going to be, or something like that. And these are not yes/no answers, which is what makes a pendulum board really, really great, is that you can change a typically yes/no swinging divination tool into a more in-depth divination tool simply by adding the board. So what you would then do is, say if you asked, what day of the week am I going to be luckiest this week? And you would then go over Monday and you would see, and you would go, is it Monday? And see if it swings. Yes. Or see if it swings at all. And then go Tuesday and see if it swings. Wednesday, see if it swings. And you will find that there is likely one day where you get a big reaction. And that is the day you then work off. Now you can then try that again to see if you get the same result again. But that is how you use these kind of more unusual aspects of a pendulum board like this. And that's also how you use a pendulum in connection with a spirit board, is that you would go over each letter. So for instance, I know someone who works with a pendulum and a spirit board and all the letters, because it's a Ouija board without the planchette. and they would ask the spirits in the space to connect and communicate through the pendulum. And then you connect the pendulum to the board, like you do when you're using it just for divination. And then they would ask, can you spell out your name? And then you go over each letter across the spirit board and see when you get a response. And as soon as you get a response, you then go back to the beginning and you try to find the next letter. And you keep going until you no longer get responses, and you're noting down all of your answers. And then it's alleged that you will end up with words and spoken communication through a pendulum with spirits, angels, fae, deities, whatever you personally choose to work with in this instance. But it is important to note that just like if you're using a Ouija board to start off with, spirit work has its dangers and it has its difficulties. So please, if you are new to spirit work, if you are new to this kind of work in general, I would not suggest trying to communicate with spirits just yet. I would make sure that you know kind of what you're getting into, how to get out of it, how to do protections, all of that kind of stuff. But that is a way that you can use them in connection with a pendulum board. So that was my feels like very, very long video on pendulums, on what they are, on how to use them, on how to choose them, on how to use a pendulum board, on how they swing. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. I tried to put as much into this video as absolutely possible. So if you did enjoy this video, feel free to give it a like. It means a lot knowing that people enjoy the content on this channel. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, video ideas, queries, or just want to chit chat with the community in the comment section down below, feel free to put a comment. I try to read and respond to absolutely as many as I can, either in written form as a response or in video form if my answer is way too long, because sometimes I do have a tendency to type a bit too much. And if you enjoy the magical content on this channel and in this video, feel free to subscribe if you would like to see more content, because I post new videos every Wednesday and every Saturday at 6 o'clock. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, I hope it was useful, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!